For most of human history, the ability to pay attention for long periods of time wasn't optional. It was trained by work and survival. This video explores how those conditions changed and what took their place. Prior to the mid-20th century, the ability to pay attention did not require deliberate cultivation. It was shaped by survival, labor, and routine, and reinforced daily by material necessity. In agrarian societies, tasks unfolded over hours, days, and seasons, demanding sustained engagement rather than intermittent focus. Farmers planted, tended, and harvested crops according to seasonal schedules that could not be violated without threatening the survival of the farm and those who depended on it. Children developed the ability to stay engaged through participation in daily labor, where instruction, discipline, and trained focus were embedded in the work itself. Working alongside adults, they absorbed rhythms of responsibility through repetition until the ability to remain engaged became habitual. As populations shifted toward urban centers in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, particularly after the Civil War, the conditions of industrial labor made the ability to pay attention imperative. Operating the machines that generated the commodities fueling the Gilded Age economy and elite fortunes required constant vigilance. Factory work placed fragile human bodies in constant proximity to machines capable of causing grievous bodily harm. Children labored alongside adults, performing monotonous work under conditions that left little room for distraction. Progressive-era reformers won limits on child labor and reduced work hours, reshaping the conditions of labor, before depression and war reasserted survival-driven demands. For many Americans, the decades following the Second World War reorganized the conditions under which people learned to pay attention. Rising standards of living, particularly in white households, reduced the immediacy of survival pressures that had once required continuous focus simply to remain safe and employed. Education increasingly offered choice rather than inheritance. Fewer children worked alongside their parents from an early age in the kinds of labor that had once structured daily attention. Leisure activities, which had long been exceptional, even morally suspect, in a working-class life, became more regular features of daily routines. As the imperative for constant work decreased, long stretches of required focus ceased to be a default feature of childhood and adulthood. The introduction of broadcast media accelerated this shift. Television, unlike books or radio, delivered images in a continuous, fully rendered stream. Viewers did not need to supply missing details or sustain imagined scenes through effortful attention. The media did that work for them. The late 20th and early 21st centuries intensified the transition, where spectatorship became a normal mode of participation. Digital technologies made mediated environments cheap, portable, and ubiquitous. Devices circulated across price points and entered schools, workplaces, and homes. Time was no longer structured by shared routines or fixed schedules, but by individualized choices about how our hours were filled. What began with television accelerated with the advent of ubiquitous access to smartphones, tablets, and digital content. In the absence of survival pressures and shared routines that once trained the ability to pay attention, market systems increasingly filled that role. Engagement could be tracked, measured, and refined. Systems learned which stimuli held people longest and which prompted return. Over time, designs adapted away from rewarding sustained attention and towards encouraging brief engagement with multiple sources of digital content rather than prolonged focus on any one of them. Clicking, scrolling, and interrupted interactions with digital content were not failures of the platforms that created or distributed it. They were sources of market data. By analyzing patterns of engagement across platforms, companies could identify which forms of distraction generated the greatest return. As a result, fragmented attention was not an unintended consequence of these systems, but an outcome that provided economically valuable information. The historical reorganization of work, survival, and daily routine helps explain the tension between institutions that require sustained attention and environments that no longer train it. As material security and choice expand, daily life fills with sources of information, entertainment, and distraction, each placing competing demands on attention. Compared to earlier periods in which survival and dangerous labor demanded sustained concentration, the conditions of a digitally saturated world make focused attention harder to sustain in settings that depend on it, including classrooms and workplaces. Understanding this shift requires moving beyond moral explanations and toward historical ones. The difficulty of sustaining attention in contemporary settings is not best understood as a decline in care or seriousness, but the consequence of changed conditions.